Hello and welcome to Race Streamer. In this video I've gone back to a round of Club 100 that I did last year, which was at Red Lodge back in October. And ahead of this video and when I did the racing on the day, I had already decided to make this a voiceover style, kind of like Super GT and what he's been doing lately. Partly because I wanted to concentrate more on the racing, but also because on this day all of the racing was condensed into half a day, so there was a lot less time between the heats and finals. I think it works out to about quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, I don't know, maybe half an hour tops between the races. So I wanted to use that time to be able to catch up with people and socialise and think about the races coming up. So this was the first heat of the day, and I was starting in second for this with Loic Ditchburn next to me, who I've come to race against in a few races. So what I was happy about is knowing that he's a fair racer, and we'd already spoken before the start of this and said, well, we're just going to make it clean. It could be close, but we'd make it clean. So coming up to the start line now, Loic was really holding the pace back, waiting for the green light, which now comes, and so it was a long hold there. Managed to get around the outside of him going into turn one. Tried to get late on the brakes, keep it around the outside. You can just see to the left of image, that was him poking his nose through. I managed to get into first, which was good, trying to hold it through the next corner. Didn't get the best exit off this one, so then you'll see to the right of picture, he just pokes his nose in again, but thankfully the next turn was the left, and I managed to hold him out dry. So from here on, I've got to be honest and say that the first heat was thankfully relatively uneventful. I just mostly held it out in the lead, so this is going to be a fairly short run through this video. But the problem that I just had there, coming off that hairpin, and I had this for pretty much the whole day, was that I could not get a good amount of I could not get a good amount of speed off that hairpin, and clearly, as you can see, I was still sorting out how to drive around this circuit at a quick but consistent pace. So even though I'd had a test in the morning, which I shared with someone, so I still got 15 minutes running in, I was definitely still finding my feet around the circuit here. So it wasn't a track that I became immediately comfortable with, like a few other circuits that we went to in the year, like Wilton Mill I got on pretty well at, and what was another one I enjoyed? I enjoyed Lid, even though it was really hard physically, but this circuit being a lot more technical, which bizarrely is kind of like Buckmore Park, which I get on really well at. I just could not find my feet with this circuit, so I was lucky in a way that for this heat, like running wide again there, so I still got to figure it out. I was lucky in a way that everyone from second place down behind me was battling away, so I didn't really clock it at the time, but I was just working out, I was just making a big lead away from the rest of the field, which was great. So I think I looked around, yeah, about here, there we go, just to see what the gap was, and I was really surprised how big it was, and that was pretty much the same way for the whole race. So I got a bit cocky, to be honest with you. I was like, okay, I've got a big lead, well, let's try and push it around the circuit, figure out where I can find some more pace and almost use it more like a test session, which is not the best thing to do. So what actually happened was that I was in first place throughout most of the race, which is grand, but then we skip ahead about a lap, and what you'll see is me push the limits a little bit too much, not to the point that I spun. Thankfully I wasn't that much of a wally on this occasion, but coming up to the last turn here I was just a bit too keen on the inside, and I hit the tyres on the inside. Now JV had been really clear about anyone hitting the tyres on the inside there would get an immediate cone penalty. There wouldn't be any warnings, it would just be a straight penalty, and yeah, that was great. So I know it says position counter in first at the moment, but technically I'm first on the rows but second, because I've already got that place deduction. So I threw away a win by doing that, which was daft. So it was a little lesson in itself there, and I knew I was going to get a cone penalty because I felt the back tyres hit the my back tyres hit the tyre stack on the inside of that corner. But it served as a little lesson of if you're in the lead and there's no point in pushing on, then it's better to just keep the win and kind of play it a bit smarter. So think like Alan Prost somewhat more, in the way that he was labelled the professor, and he always raced pretty smart using his head, not trying to go flat out all the time like Senna did around Monaco that time, that he had a massive leak and crashed out. So yeah, lesson learned there. Skipping ahead now to the final third of the final lap, and nothing much had changed. I was still in the lead by a good healthy cushion. It might have been around 5 seconds or something. Still driving kind of inconsistently. I'd managed to sort out what I was doing in the last corner by this point though, which was good. And there's the checkered flag, so I was happy with that, in the sense of knowing if I hadn't been a prat and got myself a cone penalty, then I would have won that one nice and easily, just by being able to work up a good lead earlier on and not get involved in any battles as a result. And big thanks as well to Loic for being an honourable sportsman, and what we spoke about before the race, saying that we were going to be clean about it. We were close, but we were super fair to each other, and it's just nice to know that you can come across other drivers like that and you can genuinely hold them to their words. Okay, so on to Heat 2. So this was going to be a completely different experience, starting mid-pack. I think I was in 12th or something like that. We'll find out in a minute anyway, from the graphics. And I'd heard from people before that Red Lodge is somewhat of a difficult circuit to overtake on. Now, obviously I didn't experience that from the first heat, but we're about to find out. So over the line, and reasonable getaway there, following the other drivers pretty closely. And then I get cut up by someone in front of me, and then, yeah. So the first corner seems to be chaos, it appears. I've never quite had a first corner experience like that in Club 100, and unsurprisingly they threw a full start. So we then had to line up again, and as a result we lost a lap of racing. So from my point of view here, I was kind of hoping just for a clean start, and from that thinking I ended up leaving a massive gap between me and the guy in front of me, which was a mistake, because as you can see I get chopped up by someone and immediately overtaken. Now the same guy that went trailing around the outside before done the same again here, and then yeah, again it's just a messy start. It was frustrating because whenever you make contacts with someone it just slows you down, even when you're overtaking. So yeah, just getting unlucky in this race, to be honest. I was trying to keep it relatively clean and stay out of trouble, but what happened in the end is I lost a bunch of places, so I end up down in 14th for the moment, and there's a huge gap to the guy in front of me. So the plan from this point onwards for the rest of the race was just to try and gain back the ground, which wouldn't be too difficult if the guys in front of me were battling, and then see if I could re-overtake some of them. Problem is that I just didn't have a lot of pace coming out of some of the corners still, so I managed to sort out the last corner in the first heat, but as you can see, there was a massive gap forming in front of me off the exit of a lot of the slow corners, which frankly at Red Lodge is basically every corner. I'd managed to get the hang of the second corner there as well, as you can see, cutting over all of the concrete, which was allowed. That wasn't a track limits thing in Club 100. They said that we were allowed to cut that corner, but it was extremely bumpy, so if you caught it in the wrong way then it just wasn't going to help your lap time. And this is what happens when someone starts fighting in terms of battling on track, then the amount of time lost is huge. So I'm immediately back with these guys. Had to think about trying to take that guy on the outside, but it didn't work, and then lost a bit of time off the back of that as well. But the good thing is, I can see when I was driving, I could see the amount that this guy was looking behind him, so it kind of gave me a little bit of confidence that I should hopefully get past him eventually, because if someone's spending that much time looking behind them, then, well, for me it kind of suggests that they're not too confident about keeping that place compared to who might be behind them, which in case is me. Fast forwarding a couple of laps, I kind of held the same gap to the driver ahead, obviously fluctuating because you come in and out of corners closer and then further apart. But then when we get to this lap here, the driver ahead started making a few mistakes, so you see they're running a little bit wide, just losing a teeny bit of time. Had to think about, again, going around the outside, but backed out of it, and ultimately should have been a bit more concise about what I was going to do driving-wise, because as you can see, I lost a bunch of time to the driver ahead again. But then things started bunching up ahead of him, and then between the few drivers ahead of me, it started chopping and changing places a bit, which is good. That helped me out, it helped me stay on the back of them, and eventually I then got in a position to be able to overtake, which is good. I think the driver ahead just got a cone penalty there as well. If you saw, he cut the inside curb and probably hit the tyre, or as I did in the first race. So even if I don't overtake him, it's going to be a case that he finishes behind me now, which is good. But to be able to make more progress up the field, I was going to have to overtake him to have a chance at anyone else as well. Right on the back of him now, which is looking good, and that's the best run out of that corner I've got so far this race. So trying to stay on the back of him, hopefully look for an opportunity to overtake later on in the lap, because this part of the track is pretty tricky to overtake. If you can see there, it doesn't really work to try and go around the outside of someone, and that left him compromised, which is good for me, so it means I could overtake going into this corner here. Now, it's a bit of a funny one, the last couple of corners at Red Lodge, because you would have thought if you hold the inside line on the approach to a corner, it would generally work for you, but not in that case. And, oh yeah, and this is where he spun me out, which is great. So, I wasn't too annoyed at the time, but looking back at it, like, you couldn't see him in the wide angle of the camera there. So he just absolutely came out of nowhere, which was, well, looking back at it was pretty frustrating, because I'd just overtaken him and obviously wanted to get back at me, which is fine, but it's part of racing. So, yeah, you can tell I'm a bit bitter about it watching it back now, but when you're in the middle of racing, at least for me anyways, you just got to crack on. So I didn't let that bother me too much, and I kind of knew that the race was over by that point. It was just a case of potentially trying to catch up to the guy ahead in case he made a mistake and I could maybe overtake. But the fact of the matter was that the guy ahead was doing decent laps, hopefully as was I, so I didn't close the gap at all, and I finished the race in that position. So yeah, not the greatest second heat to have, and thankfully, in a strange way, I didn't actually start that high up the grid. So in terms of positions lost, I think it was 3 places maybe, so it wasn't an absolute disaster of a race from the point of view of a race I had earlier at Buckmore in the year. I started on pole, and that was a wet race, and I spun twice. So I think I lost maybe 14 positions in that one. So yeah, that definitely could have gone better on that occasion, but thankfully it was damage limitation in this second heat. Right, now on to heat 3. So starting from the other side of the grid, still mid-pack. I think I was 1 position lower than in heat 2 on the starting grid. And before this race, JV had a pretty stern word with everyone. He called them all out circuit and said the driving standards had to improve, less contacts, less cone penalties if possible. So yeah, you'll see what happens now anyway. It's kind of unavoidable. The nice thing was I managed to get through these few corners without any contacts, but then everyone just started bunching up here. And yeah, too many drivers trying to fight for the same position on track at the same time, and yeah. Thankfully I managed to gain a few positions out of it, but I don't know what was happening behind me, but I know it wasn't clean, put it that way. So massive gap to the driver ahead now, just again concentrating on trying to close that down. I guess there must be someone chasing fairly close behind me as well, because I was taking a somewhat defensive line. Still haven't sorted out that hairpin. I was getting loads of oversteer on the exit of that, and I seemed to wave the driver through. I guess that was because I didn't want to get held up and lose any time, and I could see he was going to overtake anyway, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. So I was just conscious of trying to catch up to the pack ahead. Clearly the guy that just overtook me was a lot quicker, so I'll try and keep on his tail if I could, but obviously that wasn't happening. Might have got a little nudge from the driver behind there, I can't quite remember to be honest, but it looked like that I'd either taken too much speed into the corner or he'd helped me out somewhat. So losing a couple of positions, but still ultimately up on where we started, which is good. Jumping forwards a lap in a bit, and the guy ahead of me and myself, we've kind of caught up to the rest of the pack, so there's a fairly long train forming here. And then I ended up carrying a bit too much speed into the last corner compared to the pack ahead, even though that was the same braking point as before, so ended up losing a bunch of time there. Pietro just came past me there, so I waved him through, because Pietro's a Class 1 driver, and I know how quick he is, because I've spent a few races following him around the circuit for half a lap, and then he's just deserted me. So I was hoping if he passed me, that I'd be able to learn some things. But the trouble is, just at Red Lodge, it's so difficult to overtake that he ends up getting held up, and I don't really want to get into an overtaking battle with him, but it's kind of unavoidable. It's like if you're not making progress forwards, then you're just going to get stuck, or someone behind's going to maybe take advantage of that and try and make their way through as well. So to be fair to Pietro, I class him as a really good racer and a good overtaker, and you can see he's just getting stuck behind the guys ahead. So if he's any proof, if I'm not, then it's proof to show that Red Lodge is indeed a difficult place to overtake. I think I've heard some people throwing about the phrase the Monaco of karting, at least in Britain anyway, and that kind of makes sense. Now, trying to keep out of trouble, the guys ahead ending up being in contact somewhat. Obviously, the guy ahead's not too happy about it, both hands off the wheel. There's no point in wasting that energy. You might as well just suck it up and keep on going. And then I got tagged. Right, so yeah, this was I'm not naming and shaming, because the nice thing is he came up to me straight after the race and said, sorry, that's my bad. And you can see it from his body language there. He knew it was his fault anyway. But yeah, Mike Hoppin that was, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, I'm not angry about that one. It was insanely annoying at the time, but the difference was he came and apologised to me after the race, so I didn't have any beef, if you can call it that, with him at all. It's the way that I'd like to deal with things if I was a driver and I put someone out of the race like that as well. But again, I've ended up in the same situation I was in Heat 2, which is where I've been taken out relatively late on into the race, and it's basically going to prove impossible to catch up to the remaining pack and overtake anyone. So once again here on the final lap, and I have actually caught the drivers ahead a little bit, but it's ultimately futile efforts. So finishing in the same position after when I was spun out, which is disappointing. So not a good day of heats. It was a strong result in the first race. Even though I got a cone penalty, I still finished second, and after starting second, so that was a neutral finishing position, which was good. But then both Heat 2 and Heat 3 being spun out, that sucks. So I think the net positions gained or lost was about -5 or -6. And I'd had worse days than that earlier in the season, just from lack of driving talent, I suppose. But to have it done in that way, where it's not your fault and someone's taking you out and you've just got to deal with it, that was annoying, to say the least. On to the B final. Now, there was no C final on this day because there weren't quite enough entries into the race event. Ollie Flashman and I just swapping places there. I think I must have realised, oh hey, I'm actually in 5th, so maybe I should be on the left. Yeah, I'm going to not be a dunce this season about that and actually try and keep in my short-term memory what side of the grid I need to be on. So, yeah, it was a miraculous result through the heats in that case, because I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was, but it turned out that so many drivers got penalties and exclusions through the event because of takeout penalties, or they would have lost positions from cone abuse or whatever you want to call it, that I actually managed to start 5th, even though I thought I'd had a dreadful day. It clearly hadn't been as bad as others. So, bad start, didn't get close enough to the guys ahead, but I managed to close up to them a little bit through the first turn. I had to brake a lot harder just to avoid hitting the back of the guy ahead there. Ended up losing the position. But from what I remember, this was actually a pretty good race. It didn't necessarily end up the best way for me, but it was lots of tight racing. Ollie just getting past me again there. It's nice having met a few drivers this year and now being able to talk about who they are while I'm racing against them, watching back a video. So it's drivers that I've just had good conversations with over time, and if not everyone, I've had mostly good, fair racing with them, even if it's not 100% of the time. So Eamon Salih going past me there. We met doing the round at Rye House. Hey, so I'm slipping back through the field here. It's not the greatest of races at the moment, but the nice thing was I was actually relieved to be having a relatively clean race with everyone. So I wasn't getting bumped by anyone trying to come past me. It was all just fair overtaking, which by this point of the day that's all I was kind of hoping for, was just some clean racing, because that's what I want to get out of Club 100 at the end of the day anyways. It's how I've made good progress through the field before, and even though this wasn't the best of days in terms of my driving was just generally a bit off the pace, it seems like a bit of a bogey track for me. It was just nice to actually have some clean racing, because frankly that's more enjoyable. If you've been nudged by someone, then it does wind you up after a while. Right, so we've just jumped forward a few laps, and thankfully, because of the battles going on ahead, I've been able to catch up to the back of a lot of them. So this is where things start getting a bit more interesting again. Now, you can see there, those three drivers holding themselves up through contact. It's just the case of, if you can stay out of contact with people, then you lose a whole lot less time. So it means the difference between me being in 8th at the moment, when I did start 5th, and you can't see where 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc. have gone. Like, if we look over this tyre wall, they are absolutely miles ahead of the rest of us. So collectively, I think I'd say this to myself as well, but if I were a bit of a smarter racer sometimes and tried to stay behind people a bit more, then there would be less time lost overall from jostling for position. And I think that goes for other people as well. Like, it's easy to look back at that in hindsight, or when you're in the heat of the moment, you're kind of thinking, oh, I've got to get past this guy because he's holding me up. Well, not always the case. So it's kind of calmed down a little bit again, settled into 8th place at the moment, trying to catch up to the guys ahead. Later on in the lap, getting a bad exit out of that turn again. I didn't think, actually, you know what, that didn't look too bad, but obviously the guy behind me got a better exit, and that's Mike Hoppin, so that was a good move. He's the guy that took me out the previous race, but like I said, he struck me as a guy who did want to go clean racing, and to be fair, that was a nice clean overtake. It was a little bit of a rub on the way by, but that's just because the track narrows there. It wasn't anything malicious, which is good. So yeah, dropped another position, but kind of managing to keep up to an extent. Again, it's not my strongest race, so could be better overall. Considering this was the last race of the day for me as well, this was as good as I was going to get. So I wasn't as far off the pace of the front runners as I had been earlier in the day. I think I was about 4 or 5 tenths off, which is more than I've been at other circuits, but compared to the nearly second down that I was at the beginning of the day, then I was happy with that anyways. So Eamon just ahead, getting a bit defensive, knowing that he's got a quicker driver behind him. To be fair, Mike's C1 driver, so yeah, and then Mike overtook, and that just opened the door for me a little bit. But again, because it's pretty twisty and narrow Red Lodge, you've not got many corners of consecutive nature in the way that you haven't got 2 lefts or 2 rights generally, then it makes it pretty difficult to get an overtake done. You can't tend to switch back underneath someone, so again, just ending up in the same position I was in before. Fast forwarding another lap, and I've managed to stay on the back of Eamon somewhat. Now, he just hit the dirt on the inside there, which pushed him wide a little bit, and then I ended up giving him a bit of a nudge. So inadvertently, I think I might have just given myself an opportunity to overtake there through not being that clean, unfortunately. So to be fair, I'll get the overtake done. I didn't get a penalty for it, so if you're one of those people that thinks play it by contact warnings, then okay, I got away with that one. But still, to be fair, it's not the way I'd intend to get past someone, but there may have been a bit of frustration creeping in at this point of the race, having lost quite a few positions and knowing that if I was going to make any progress forward, I needed to be maybe a bit more aggressive with my overtaking. Managing to get back to the drivers ahead here, which is good. It's nice to make a bit of progress through the field. I think I must have got a tap from behind though. There was a massive amount of oversteer coming through one of those turns. Yeah, so I definitely got contact from behind there because I put a hand up, obviously just getting a little bit annoyed with the driver behind. And because I kind of let that get to me, then I'm running wide in that turn, and then there's a massive gap in front of me again. So goes to show, you can kind of hear how I'm talking about my driving now as well, but there's so many places for improvement. And I'm not doing a horrendous job, but it's good when you can look back on this sort of thing and analyse and see where you could have been better over time. I'm not at the stage yet where I can say, oh, look at my race, how great was this, I did everything almost perfectly. There's still a lot of flaws in my driving, especially around this circuit. So getting a reasonable exit out of that corner again, but apparently not good enough because there's another driver overtaking. Now, amazingly, the guy that just overtook me, not actually spoken to him yet, but he won the Super Final Championship last year, so clearly a very talented driver, and I'm surprised to say, but he actually started pretty much at the back of the field because when he'd been overtaken earlier in the day, I think he must have taken some people out and ended up with a load of penalties. So that's how I managed to start so high up the grid compared to what I thought I was going to, is because even if you finish low down the grid in Club 100, you'll still get some points for it, whereas if you take out someone, then you get a disqualification that gives you 0 points, and there's a fair difference there between if you finish last and you do get some points. I think I don't know, it's in single digits, like you might get 4 points for finishing last or something, and it's 1 point up for each new position, so there's no bias towards finishing higher up the field. But it's then a noticeable difference if you get disqualification, because no points versus even like 5 points, that's a huge difference. That's like a 5 position change in the race. So goes to show, if you can keep it clean in Club 100, then you do avoid getting bumps down the field for when you start through one of the finals. And yeah, here we are on the last lap. So 9th position, it's not bad. Would have liked to have been a bit higher up, but ultimately the race has been pretty good overall. It's not been too many bumped manoeuvres, which is good. And then coming into the last corner here, we're just going to get overtaken once more. Now, to be fair, that's Emily Rogers. I've spoken to her briefly a few times over the year as well. That was a heck of a move. Like, I have to admit, sitting there in that moment, I was like, wow, fair play for that. And yeah, there was a little bit of contact, but that's just because I decided I was going to try and stick it out rather than letting her go, because it was the last corner. But we both got through it unscathed. So yeah, impressive bit of overtaking, and that rounded off the day at Red Lodge. So if you like this video, let me know. It's a bit of a different format. I'm not sure I'm going to stick with it this year, but that's what we've got for the moment. Buckmore video will be following soon. Stay tuned. I'll see you later.